All right, so we are live. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Dr. Rakowski.
Happy, beautiful, amazing evening. I trust all is well in your world.
It certainly is. Well, I was just saying to someone today that here in Toronto, Ontario, I should say, we've had an absolute fantastic summer. Adequate rain, which is good. We need for the greenery, but at the same time, lots of sunshine, lots of hot sunny days, including today. And I tried to get some sunshine today, so pretty thankful. What about you? How's the weather where you are?
Well, right now I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, but I came over from Orlando, Florida, and before that I was in Johannesburg, Durban, South Africa, and Mauritius, which I actually didn't even know existed, but Mauritius and delicious rhyme for good reason. It's delicious scenery, delicious food, delicious people, just a wonderful paradise.
Now, what brings you to Vegas? Because, like I said, the last time we spoke, you were in Houston.
Yeah, I've got a mentor here, and he's got a 5-day event, and I decided to come out for that. And he said, "Look, why don't you come out a little bit early, and we'll do a private mastermind at my place."
Oh,
Uh,
wow, that's
and
great.
and I said, "You know what? I'll make the changes, and I'll be there." So my flight was a little delayed, or I'd be a little more cozy and comfortable. I haven't even unpacked yet, but our schedule
Well,
worked out perfect.
that's great. So why don't I give an introduction, to who you are for all of the viewers and listeners at home or in their cars or maybe at the gym on the treadmill, and then I'll hit you with a shotgun approach with some fast, rapid questions, and then we'll dive into some more detailed conversation afterwards. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is a big honor, and as you've seen on my Instagram and you've seen on my Facebook, I've been very excited over the past week or so talking about this. Dr. Bob Rakowski is a functional medicine pioneer. He is a true renegade. And like I was saying before, a real rock star celebrity in the medical field. And if you don't know the medical field, then you may not be aware of him, but you're going to be aware of him now. So he's a doctor of chiropractor, kinesiologist, certified clinical nutritionist, certified biological terrain instructor. He knows how to test all of your bodily fluids and how to measure sickness and health through that. He's active director of the Natural Medicine Center in Houston, Texas. In addition to running a very busy practice, Dr. Rakowski has lectured internationally for over 24 years in various topics, natural medicine and lifestyle medicine. He has appeared on numerous television programs, international radio talk shows. He's recognized as an expert in functional endocrinology and in-office diagnostic procedures to assess nutrition and nutritional status. His clinical experience ranges from treating elite professional athletes to critically ill patients with a variety of cancers and autoimmune diseases. Welcome, Dr. Rakowski. And actually, I'm going to say one more thing. A friend of mine and colleague, he compared you, and I've said this on my Instagram, he compared you to Dr. Bland and Dr. Perlmutter, and in his opinion, you are a superior practitioner and doctor to them. So, wow.
You know what? That's one heck of a compliment. Dr. Bland, I think, is the greatest mind in nutritional biochemistry, and Dr. Perlmutter, certainly one of the top in neurology, and certainly as natural medicine and functional medicine relate to it. But I may give your friend a little nod there, because I do see a huge variety of patients, from the critically ill to the best of the best. So maybe that gives me a little edge in variety category, but those guys are giants, and even to be mentioned in the same sentence is an honor.
Wow. Well, that's great. So why don't we, I'll start right ahead, and we're going to do a shotgun approach to some questions, quick answers. I might surprise you with some, we'll see. And then we'll dive deeper into some conversations. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we've already mentioned this, but you currently reside in Houston. So tell me about maybe some of your travels from where you grew up, Wisconsin, till now.
Oh, heck, I've been on 5 different continents, but most of it's actually been professionally teaching. Over the last handful of years, I've gotten a lot more vacations. So I've weaned my clinical practice down to 20 hours a week. So I went fishing on the Great Barrier Reef and out to Grand Cayman and the Bahamas and Europe and South America and Costa Rica and Africa just most recently, and south of France. Just it's a
That's
beautiful
great.
world. So
It
lots
sure
to
is
see.
actually. And you'd mentioned Cayman Islands. I don't know if you know this, but I used to live in Cayman Islands.
Stingray City is one of my favorite places.
It's a wonderful place. For viewers, listeners, if you've never been to Stingray City, it's in Cayman Islands, and you actually get to swim with the stingrays, and it's their own natural habitat. It's not a farmed ecosystem or anything like that.
I did
So
that one before Crocodile Hunter got stung, so I don't know how their business dropped after that, but it was pretty
wow.
amazing with those
Yeah,
phenomenal creatures.
absolutely. Let me get you with your favorite quote.
Wow. My life is my message.
Your life is your message. That's
Yeah,
pretty powerful. And you live by that, definitely.
absolutely.
What would you say is your strongest attribute?
I'm going to say discipline. Once I make a decision, I'm locked in and it's going to happen.
We're definitely going to touch on that some more. So, discipline. All right. What about your favorite book?
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
And that's kind of that's is that an old book or is that a new book? Or I've certainly
No,
seen.
it's at least probably coming up on 30 years, but Stephen Covey spent 200 years studying literature on success. And
Right.
he came to realize that quick fixes don't do it. And when he came up with the 7 habits, you know, when you look at it, the first one is proactivity. Know where you
Okay.
want to go and make a plan. And then he has personal habits, and then uh, relationship habits, and then finally the habit that he calls sharpening the saw, which is keeping yourself sharp mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually every single day.
So that's your favorite book simply because it encompasses all areas
It
of
was a
one's
life
life.
changer. When I
Right.
read that, he says, read this as if you're going to teach it. And that resonated with me. So when I read something, it's all highlighting and underlining, and I outline and I redo it. And I actually did read it to teach it. And,
Okay.
then you apply it, and it's a game changer.
Very good. Um, Here's a good one. What are you currently challenged with? Or what are some of your current challenges?
Oh boy. Wow. Uh, how would you even put that? Mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, impactful. I would rate my life pretty high in every category.
Okay.
I'm going to say that my highest calling right now is to provide the highest value to the most people with good leverage in a way that's actually meaningful in their world. And one of my mentors once said, if your goals can be achieved by you alone, they're not very big. So,
Right.
it takes a whole world to create sometimes mega change, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make the world better, stronger, faster, smarter every day with better choices.
That's wonderful. I definitely applaud that. Which brings me to kind of a question that's very similar. Two-part. What are you most proud of professionally and personally?
Professionally, it's got to be having the I'll even call it courage to be really aggressive with nutritional therapies in a way that could actually turn around critically ill people. There's many things that are perfectly safe that I'll dose every waking hour for 7 to 10 days, and in extreme cases 21 days. And I've seen people with their life on the line and their limb on the line, and thank God those people are alive today. And we do the same thing with elite athletes, but it usually doesn't take that long a window to turn them around. You can see
Right.
elite athlete change in days.
Hmm. That's we're definitely going to divulge more onto that. I love that. And then what about personally?
Personally, it's got to be my children.
Okay.
I've got 3 kids, and 2 of them are happily married, and expecting my first grandson due Christmas Day.
Hmm.
So that's when you see your kids succeed, that's wonderful. And my middle daughter just graduated from Texas State with her degree in psychology, and balance wonderful people with good chosen mates, and adding value to the world in their own unique way.
Great. Now, actually, and I apologize to your other children because I've only heard of one of your sons. He's a real rock star in business, is he not? He's even surpassed you financially. Is that correct?
Well, at least for his age, yeah. And Jacob's 26, and he's been retired since 23. Heck, I was still in school at 27 and accumulating 6 figures of debt. And ultimately, we turned that around into some real nice revenue and wealth and wealth that's actually working for me. But my middle daughter is Alexis. She's 22. She just graduated from Texas State. She's got a beautiful heart and soul, and she's physically beautiful like her mother, and loves everybody and everything, and studied psychology to make the world better. My youngest, Christy, is a teacher. She finishes her teaching degree in December. She's doing her first teaching assignment at a public school. Heart of gold. She got married young, which I thought was a little bit interesting. But as my wife said, Christy's the most domestic of all the kids.
Right.
And she's got a phenomenal husband who's offspring of the American dream. His father came over from the Ukraine, barely spoke English, started painting houses, ultimately bought the painting company, now has business in multiple states, wonderful wealth, and contributing, his craft to humankind. And Yuri, my son-in-law, a great man with a great family and a great work ethic that I know that can protect and provide for my beautiful daughter, who, by the way, can certainly stand on her own 2 feet and protect and provide as well. So it's a great combination.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So here's another one. I'm going to maybe get you on the spot on this one, but probably not, because you never really surprise me, but sometimes you do. What was the last generous thing you've done, other than taking this call? Because I am very grateful for your generosity and your time right now, as I need to express that to all of my viewers and listeners. Again, we're all very thankful. So thank you.
So, 2 days, was it yesterday or was it 2 days ago? There was a silent auction. So it was 2 days ago for a purse that was made by, women that were really struggling in Thailand. So I put in the highest bid for the top purse and bought it for my wife. So even though there was an exchange for something, we paid more than we would for a Louis Vuitton, which,
right.
It certainly excites my wife and I a lot more to help women in Thailand than to buy something with a cute logo on it.
Of course. That's great. And finally, what are you grateful for today?
Every breath. Look at this beautiful world that we live in. It's so abundant. There's a book called Abundance, Our Future is Better Than We Think. And if you look out there, times have never been better until tomorrow when we make it better. I'm glad that you made that point, because, sometimes you hear people say, your breath and live life like it's your last, and, all the cliches, but they really are true. And you, as a practitioner, you've seen both sides of the spectrum. You've seen people in the utmost wealth of health, but you've also seen the other end of the spectrum, where people are essentially on death's doorstep. Has that in any way desensitized you, or has that made you even more empathetic towards others and your own life? Well, fortunately, I'm not in a position where I get desensitized, and I'm actually a pretty sensitive guy. I cry with my patients because I feel pain at what they're going through. I think that's one thing that helps me as a practitioner, as a human. My mentors from the very beginning talked about being heart-centered. I've got 2 wonderful parents who have been married 60 years. It's technically 59 right now. Next year is 60. But they literally started dating in junior high school, dated all the way through high school, been together their entire life, and they understand what true love is. And, they didn't have let's just say a financially abundant life, but they had a spiritually abundant life, a loving, abundant life. And they taught all of their kids great values. So my oldest sister is a brain expert. My middle sister, teaches emergency room nurses. She has 4 kids that are all high achievers. Sadly, my youngest sister was killed in an accident, but at age 28, she was already president of the Wisconsin Brain Trauma Association.
Wow.
And so my parents taught us love and they taught us hard work. And if you have those two things, I think you can create a great life.
Yeah. And I think you're maybe missing one, because maybe that's one of the attributes that you developed is from your parents, is the discipline, because it certainly takes a lot of discipline to have a successful relationship that long.
When I would put up my life pyramid, the first year I did that, Barry Sears put up the USDA food pyramid, and he said if ever there was a terrorist-like plot designed to destroy the health of the world, this would be it. So I created my own life pyramid with love, purpose, and discipline at the base. And then our wonderful friend and mentor Nandor said, "Hey Bob, I think love deserves its own rung," and he was
Wow.
right. So I gave it its own rung. So love is the base of everything, but purpose and discipline as well.
Yeah. So why don't we go into that and move into that, to my next or not question right now. It's quite amazing how the universe works and how synergy happens. And my mentor, Nandor Bajus, he was mentored by you. Was it 20 years ago?
At least, yeah. Nandor and I go back a long way.
Right. And I've been so fortunate to have him take me under his wing. He has taught me so much. He's directed me, in certain education fields and whatnot. And wow, talk about going full circle by now having an opportunity to work with you and discuss with you my passion and your passion and his passion. The role and importance of mentors, both locally, so being physical mentors that you can connect with, whether it's weekly or annually or whatnot, and also non-locally, where mentors, you can have a celebrity mentor or a mentor that's across the world. What is your relationship with mentors? How many mentors do you have, and who do you mentor?
Well, how many do I have? I don't even know that we can count them. But at one point, I created a mentor and advisory board, and I picked the ideal person that I wanted to model mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, financially, impactfully. And some of these people are alive and some of them are dead, but they can mentor through their message. Gandhi
Mm-hmm.
mentored through his message. Martin Luther King mentored through his message. Confucius mentored through many, many messages, right? So Confucius, one of the greatest thinkers of all time. But my relationship with mentors is ever evolving. And certainly when I see someone that has taken something to a high level that I have an interest in, I have a curiosity, and I'll start doing my own legwork and groundwork. And it's so easy to find information on people. Then you start looking and seeing, does this person, have not just that, but the kind of value system that I admire. And I will admit that over time, I've made a few mistakes in judgment of people that I picked as mentors.
Right.
But thank God people can teach us good and maybe not so good at the same time.
Right.
And we probably all can do that. So,
what would you advise or give advice to someone who is seeking a mentor? What are some of the things, or maybe some of the approaching techniques that they could use to approach a mentor?
well, one is be sure that they have the results that you're looking for. One of my mentors, Zig Ziglar, who I met in person, saw in conference, read his books. He passed, but he was one of the greatest speakers of all time. But he was mentoring a young man, and he says, I want to be like my boss. And he said, well, tell me about your boss. Well, the boss had a lot of money, but he was 3 times divorced. He was 50 pounds overweight. He was diabetic, and he had an alcohol problem. And he says, you sure you want that guy leading you? And so sometimes people have maybe a thing or two that look pretty good on the outside, but we both know it's on the inside what matters most. So before you get too deeply involved with anybody, try to get an understanding of their character. And, it's wisdom that you can't make a good deal with a bad person. And it's also kind of hard to make a bad deal with a good person. So pick good people first, and then let's go for good results. And there are plenty out there.
Yeah, good point. So why don't we go into your practice, your current practice as a practitioner, me being a new practitioner in this field. What are some of the common or the commonalities that you see amongst your patients on a general spectrum? So not elite athletes and not, very, very ill individuals.
We could even throw all those in the spectrum because, in doing many, many thousands of patient evaluations all over the world, people as a general rule are too acid, right?
Okay.
And we can talk into the biochemistry of that. And most people have a heightened stress response where they actually then take themselves to a point of cortisol resistance. That's almost universal, both of those. Then we start looking at things like leaky gut, which you are wonderfully familiar with, and then, just imbalance in the microbiome in a way that's not so healthy. Those are four things that are pretty universal. I used to talk about stress, toxins, malnutrition, and physical inactivity being what I like to call the deadly quartet. But certainly inactivity is not universal. There's a lot of people that err on the side of overactivity. Please set that down. Thank you so much. When I checked in, I had to get a special entry into my room because somehow the key system wasn't working. But,
okay.
Wonderful young man just helped me out. Thank you again.
Very good. You'd mentioned a biological factor, chemical factor. Here's an interesting question, and it's always something that I like to think about and consider. The whole chicken or the egg, which came first in terms of neurobehavioral problems and chemical imbalances? What came first? Is it a nutritional deficiency of someone, or is it a brain chemical imbalance that cascades into the nutrient deficiency?
Well, I actually want to go into really at least three of the four, if not all four: stress, toxins, malnutrition, physical inactivity. When we start looking at epigenetics, and there's plenty of studies on it, they looked at women who were pregnant during the 9/11 attacks that were really affected by the World Trade Center. And they found that their offspring were profoundly affected in terms of their brain by that stress impact. And that puts them on a heightened stress response and basically a setup for anxiety. And, our brain has two general categories. We have pick-me-ups and calm-me-downs. But when you're anxious, you're firing a lot of glutamate. And I don't know if the whole audience wants to know this, but glutamate at high levels literally destroys the central nervous system. It can be buffered by magnesium and calm and deep breathing, other things like that. When we start looking at the toxins, again, epigenetics, there's a huge risk factor list for autism, which has just become pandemic. When I was growing up, I hadn't even heard of autism. There were some Down syndrome children, but those were the only kids that were unusual, and you could see that they were very, very different. But this autism is very much a poisoned brain, and those are the top risk factors that we're seeing, either exposure in utero or early life. And then we go with malnutrition. Well, when nutrition is optimal, you buffer the stress more effectively. You buffer the toxins more effectively. World Health Organization says malnutrition is the top cause of death on planet Earth and exists in every country, just in different forms. In developed countries, it's overconsumption, undernutrition. We've depleted our soil. The soil doesn't have to give it to the plants and animals. Plants and animals can't give it to the humans. So in that respect, we're creating a worldwide deficit.
Well, that's pretty powerful stuff. You'd mentioned, being a factor of, children's health is prenatal factors and stress. A lot of my clients are women. I've worked with some women who were trying to conceive and they couldn't successfully. Have had a few women, following my protocol. They then gave birth to healthy children. But do you want to divulge more on that, just prenatal factors and stress and the importance of a healthy mother?
Sure. So, sick animals don't reproduce. We know that very, very easily. Sick plants don't reproduce. In some of my plant lectures, I'll talk about some of my favorite herbs, but, there's an herb called reishi, which a lot of it's grown in a plastic bag. But you look, it looks very depleted. It doesn't produce spores, so it can't propagate. So if the right circumstances don't exist, plants and animals do not reproduce.
Right.
So stress can even completely stop ovulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very critical. And understand that, especially a mom, she needs to have all that blood and nutrition going to that baby. But when you're in fight or flight, you're prioritizing it to something that's not even happening. So we want to buffer the stress. Toxins are a big part of the infertility issue, because so many of these toxins are hormonal disruptors. We have xenoestrogens in plastics, pesticides injected into animals, and then we have metalloestrogens, which are universal in the environment. And I've seen plenty of women, by the way, the birth control pill works by creating an estrogen toxic circumstance in already estrogen toxic people with a chemical known as ethinyl estradiol, which is 100 times stronger than human estrogen. And there's a good portion of women that post birth control, they suddenly can't conceive at all. They don't ovulate because they're still so toxic from those estrogens.
Mm-hmm.
So stress, toxins, malnutrition, if you don't have enough nutrition to take care of yourself, how can you grow a healthy baby? And that's one of the interesting paradoxes about hormones. When a woman experiences an insulin spike, that puts the brakes on something called sex hormone binding globulin. And that frees up more estrogen to be available, and progestin as well. So people in today's environment would ask, well, why would that be? We don't want that happening. But way back when food was scarce, an insulin spike meant food was available. That's a good time to procreate.
Right. Interesting. Interesting indeed. You'd mentioned glutamate being a factor. It's an excitatory hormone, but it also converts into GABA, correct?
Yeah. So interesting enough, the most abundant amino acid in muscle and plasma is glutamine. Glutamine is one enzyme step away from glutamate. And if your body can make something that fast, it's going to be important. So in the brain, it's going to trigger a fight or flight response. In the body, it's actually a neurotransmitter of pain. But glutamate is only one enzyme step from GABA, and the enzyme is called glutamic acid decarboxylase. And B6 is a very critical molecule in that conversion, as is taurine. And so those are two things. B6 is depleted by an estrogen toxic circumstance. In fact, B6 is called pyridoxine. That's the name, but PMS could be re-abbreviated for, instead of premenstrual syndrome to pyridoxine makes sense, or please make it stop, because estrogen toxicity depletes it. And then taurine is a little different spot of the methylation cycle, but you need, magnesium, you need riboflavin, you need B6, you need B9, you need B12, and you need enough cysteine and not too much heavy metals and not too much oxidation in order to adequately make taurine. So we have a taurine depleted society. That, by the way, makes us hyper. It can cause heart arrhythmia as well. So taurine is something, it's one of those individual amino acids that I will conditionally use to get people out of trouble, especially with anxiety or arrhythmia.
Now, and you'd mentioned about, some buffering factors, and I know, and this is still kind of new to me, but Ganoderma, does it not buffer glutamate as well?
Yeah, actually, nicely. And it's actually a GABA facilitator. So when you look at Ganoderma, it's going to alkalize the system. It actually puts the brakes on the stress response. Right. It dilates the airways, so you can actually breathe deep. And we know that a deep breath starts putting the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system. And then it's got all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water. But it's such a powerful glutamate buffer and GABA facilitator that there are studies that show that it's actually anti-seizure.
Interesting. Going back to you touched on deep breaths, and why don't we talk about one of the 4 pillars of health? You were talking about pH, cortisol, gut, and the microbiome, but the pH, deep breathing, that promotes alkaline or increasing the pH. Do you want to talk more about the importance of an alkaline state over an acidic state? And here we go some more. What are some of the common foods that are acidic, and what are the factors that we need to avoid and try to stay away from?
First thing I want to do when I get into acid alkaline is let people know that life is acid. So by the time we start making energy, oxygen goes into the cell, carbon dioxide comes out. Carbon dioxide adds to water in the blood to form something called carbonic acid. And we've got somewhere between 50 and 100 trillion cells doing that, again, between 50 and 100 trillion times a day. So we're making a ton of acid. So all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. When I blow off carbon dioxide, less of that to convert to carbonic acid. The liver and kidneys work together. We sweat. Even the bowel's acid. And sometimes people will cringe a little bit and then think about the primary organism of the gut, which is acidophilus or acid loving. So it loves an acid environment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always creating acid, but if our elimination routes work well and our buffering systems work well, and buffers are proteins and phosphates and vitamins and minerals, they all work. So good nutrition status makes a difference. But the vast majority of people that we're going to see, unless they have very special training, are profoundly shallow breathers. And so by not blowing off the right amount of carbon dioxide, they're recirculating, a suboptimal system and suboptimal pH. Every single hormone in the body is pH dependent. So as people start shifting, in either direction, and the way they commonly shift is to acid, then they become less efficient. And, so many different things require energy. I tell people we don't just use it for singing and dancing. Our cells use it for nutrient absorption, toxin elimination, and cellular repair. And when those are shut down, or inefficient, then all those problems begin to escalate. And when you start talking about the gut, there's so many toxins that are created within the gut. In fact, Chinese medicine used to say that nearly every disease started in the gut. And certainly back then that would make sense because our food was nutritious, our air and environment was nowhere near as toxic. So those two things were gone. Stress probably always existed, but they didn't know so much about hygiene, so they would get more bad bugs, and the gut was a common entry point.
Mm-hmm. And you hit the nail on the top there with regards to gut health. You are a gut health expert, and I am turning into, and I like to consider myself somewhat of an expert now on gut health as well. And I really implement, all of the clients that I see, I want to fix the digestion, improve their gut health, improve their microbiome, because if we can improve their digestion, then we can improve overall health from there, because it just cascades. So do you want to just really talk about maybe some key supplements that you use in your practice for overall kind of like bare bones basic gut health?
Well, when I talk about bare bones gut health, I like to tell people that there's 5 things that we really need to consider. Then we'll get into the supplementation. But
okay,
number one, what are you eating? Right? Because everything that goes through there is going to make a big difference. And many people are making very bad choices, and that begins to acidify the environment, feed the bad bugs, and a bad cascade. Number 2, how's your digestion? So digestion, Pavlov actually proved that it starts in the brain. When they rang the bell, they could actually trigger the saliva response. Well, saliva has an enzyme called alpha amylase. That's important. That process starts, and it actually begins to prepare the entire digestive tract. But we also need to chew the food. And there are plenty of studies that show that when people chew more, they eat about 12% less because satiety is going to be a better factor. Then when we start looking at the rest of digestion, hydrochloric acid, it's estimated that it takes 600% more energy to make hydrochloric acid than any other chemical in the body. Then we'll get a little technical here. There's a quote from the medical literature: all toxins inhibit mitochondrial function. Mitochondria make 94.4% of human energy. So when we begin to deplete energy production because of toxin exposure, the first thing that drops is hydrochloric acid. So that starts a cascade in the gut, which is not so good at all. Then you start looking at the pancreas. We've got the endocrine pancreas. And we've got the digestive pancreas. Then we have the gallbladder, which is going to be very important as well. And then even the intestinal border has a part in the digestive process. So sometimes we need to use supplements like hydrochloric acid. Sometimes we use pancreatic enzymes like protease, lipase, and amylase. When you start looking at the gallbladder, lipase can help that as well. But sometimes even something like ox bile is an old remedy that's been used from some nutrition companies that I found really good for the gallbladder, but we'll also do a gallbladder flush. One of the next questions is, how often do you poop? When something goes into your system, it's estimated that it should take about 18 to 22 hours to pass through in completion. So there's different tests. You could have someone, let's say drink a bottle of chlorophyll or eat a ton of beets, right? That'll add an interesting color to the stool. And I have patients that sometimes are still passing, evidence of that 4 or 5 days later. So we know their transit is poor. The primary job of the colon is to reabsorb water. the nutrition part is done with the exception of water. So if stuff's sitting in the colon too long, water and toxins are being absorbed.
Right.
Then we want to know what kind of bugs live in your gut. Dysbiosis is rampant because of all literally the antimicrobials in the environment. And then finally, do you have a leaky gut? And my three favorites for leaky gut are actually pretty simple. Vitamin D is pretty critical. The amino acid glutamine is critical. And then I actually like colostrum. And just because you're a gut perfectionist like myself, I was at a conference where a guy named Andrew Keach, who literally wrote the book on colostrum, was there. And, he said, all mammals give birth to live young. All mammals nurse their young. All mammal milk is different. So human is different than cow, than goat, than sheep, than killer whale. All mammal colostrum is identical. So yeah, fascinating. So we can, when we start getting raw milk, which would not be denatured, right? Mammals don't consume pasteurized milk. They get raw milk directly from the mother. But when we're getting things like cow milk, which may not be the best choice for a lot of people, goat's milk closer, sheep milk. I hadn't heard anything about pig milk, but our digestive tract is pretty similar to pigs. It might actually be a good choice if we fed our pigs reasonably. But that colostrum is all identical, and that helps to seal and heal the gut, kill off infection. It's really a wonderful molecule of nature.
Mm-hmm. That's there's actually a Zymogen. They just really introduced. I don't know what the product is, but it's like an egg-based colostrum alternative. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So they actually have a hyperimmune egg. And what they do is they actually expose the animals to some of the most common pathogens that are really giving people grief. Mm-hmm. And that immune response goes to the embryo. Okay. And then when you consume that, you get those phenomenal antibodies. It's a nice product.
So that could be something, maybe a colostrum alternative, if the person felt okay, good. Going back to some supplements. I pretty much have what you had listed. Plus, I've got a few more, and I started to. Here's the kind of the caveat. A lot of my clients drink coffee, mm-hmm. and for the longest time, I was like, no coffee, no coffee. It's an excitatory. It speeds up your adrenals. It halts your digestion, all that stuff. And it's acidic. So I started to I started to supply my clients with King Coffee, but Organo, mm-hmm. just because it has the medicinal properties of Ganoderma. And I know you also have that at your clinic. Do you want to expand more on that?
Yeah, that was a game changer for me. So understand, one of the things that I've done for just, my entire time in clinical practice would put people on detox. And, I could take away their sugar, I could take away their gluten, I could take away their alcohol, but don't ask me to stop coffee, and people just wouldn't stop. And occasionally I get them to switch to a nice organic brand, and that was a better choice. But when I came across Organo, I realized I had a whole different angle that I could take it. When I put people on a detox, I'd tell them, you have two choices, healthy coffee or no coffee. So Ganoderma is considered by many sources the most alkaline food on the planet. So it's going to induce some of the effects of chlorogenic acid in coffee. Mm-hmm. And people will sometimes, check the pH of their cup. And certainly the Ganoderma makes a difference, but in the body, I believe it makes a much bigger difference. So we commonly know that if we put lemon juice in a cup, it's acidic, but in our body, it becomes alkaline because of the nutrition within it. So Ganoderma is alkaline to start, but becomes much more alkaline within the body. We talked about the GABA buffering effect of it. So that's going to buffer some of the effects of stress. But when you start looking at caffeine, here's what the studies have shown. Okay. Bodies adapt to constant stimuli. So, when you train, I'm imagining you have really good variety in your program, or your body wouldn't respond the way that it obviously has for a long, long time. And so if we give it the constant stimuli, some of the effects begin to disappear. So they found within about 5 days of consistent coffee intake at 3 cups a day, then the adrenal response was attenuated by more than 90%.
you want
So
to
then,
explain? Do you want to maybe
sure.
go in a little bit more deeper on that point?
In terms of buffering the adrenal stress response, or in terms of how bodies ignore constant stimuli?
Exactly, how bodies ignore the constant stimuli.
Sure. So, often I don't have a pair of glasses with me, but I'll have a sunglass in my bag, and I'll put a pair of sunglasses on my head.
Okay.
And if I start doing something, I'll walk around and go, where the heck are my sunglasses? And I might look here, there, and everywhere. And all of a sudden I go, oh, here they are. I have a Fitbit. Otherwise, I hadn't worn something on my wrist for a while, but I forget it unless I think of it or bump it. When we have people may know it from an endocrine point of view in terms of insulin resistance, because it's
Mm-hmm.
so common. But as the body keeps releasing insulin, what the body does is it decreases its receptors, the receptor number and sensitivity to insulin. And so it takes more insulin to get the same job done. When we start looking at cortisol resistance, which, by the way, is the medical literature uses these exact words. Many, if not all, New World primates have elevated cortisol and cortisol resistance. Blue light, which is around us, puts the brakes on melatonin. Melatonin puts the brakes on the adrenals. But as we're running all this cortisol, we dampen our ability to control our inflammatory process. Now, coffee is more of a catecholamine or acute stress response. It increases epinephrine and norepinephrine, and that's the response that literally mostly normalizes within 5 days of consistent intake. And most people drink their coffee every day, so that was a reasonable way to design the study.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe coffee drinking is going away. There's some very elite people like yourself that'll stay away for a period of time. But suddenly, what if the coffee we give them is far healthier than no coffee at all?
Yeah.
And that's what we found to be.
Well, and and on a personal level, I was never a coffee drinker, but over the years and recently with my schooling, there has certainly been a lot more late nights of studying going into the wee hours of 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I now have been enjoying the organo coffee. It wakes me up. I'm alert, but at the same time, when it's time to go to bed, I can go to sleep. And before that, before I was introduced to the organo, I was trying some other coffees and I couldn't sleep after my studying. So what does that say?
Well, I want to add a couple things to that. So there are studies on Ganoderma and chemotherapy, and they've studied some very specific chemotherapies, and then they've studied general. But Ganoderma is so good at helping the chemo clear from the body that it basically protects the patient from the chemo. So I've got plenty of things on my Facebook page, and where we've showed people, and they're very generic when they give their testimonial, quite simply because the Federal Trade Commission would go after us for making a claim, right? You can't make a claim, especially on cancer, for a food or supplement.
Right.
These people will say, listen, I went through my chemo, I didn't lose my hair, I had all my energy, I beat my cancer, that was amazing. But there's studies on Ganoderma and doxorubicin. So it helps to clear that without damaging the heart. There's studies on Ganoderma and cisplatin. It keeps cisplatin from damaging the kidney, enhances the killing effect. There's many ways by which Ganoderma enhances the killing effect, but one of the things is to alkalize the environment around the tumor. And the medical literature says this: if you can alkalize the external environment around a cancer, you actually decrease the probability of metastasis and increase the killing effect of chemotherapy. So we'll go back.
Wow, that's a double header right there.
Oh, it's powerful. It's
Yeah.
beyond powerful. So when we look at something as easy as detoxifying caffeine, then we help the body clear it more effectively. Then we throw in the double whammy of it being a GABA facilitator. And there's plenty of people, not all, but plenty, that can take a cup at bedtime and sleep like a baby.
The organo infused coffee.
Sure, I will go with organo specifically. There's other companies that have reishi.
Right.
Now, we have a process by which we infuse it where we maximize the taste of the coffee, and people don't even know it's in there. There's other competitors, they have reishi coffee. God bless them, because it's a better choice. But when people test them side by side, they say, well, that one tastes like mushroom soup. This one tastes like coffee. I prefer coffee.
Now, I've got a question, because like I said, I've been implementing this in my practice, and I'm going to take a total detour. We're going to go away from cancer. I've got one gentleman, he had gout. And so I got him on the King coffee, but at the same time, I still, I put him on a protocol. I said, you got to, take your dairy out, stay away from some foods, implement some other foods, and within 8 days, no more flare-ups, no more gout. Do you want to explain how the Ganoderma helps with the gout?
Sure. So gout is a defect in purine metabolism, and certainly we need good liver and kidney function to maximize that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ganoderma, there's so many fascinating things about how it affects the liver's ability to more effectively clear toxins, but it does the same thing for the kidneys. I've had patients with even more extreme cases where they have something called acute glomerulonephritis, and the inside of their kidneys are profoundly infected and inflamed, and they're spilling protein, and too often
Oh, wow.
that would lead to a critical case with these cases. But since Ganoderma's safe, and there's no known toxicity, but I'll qualify that. They've tested it with the equivalent of 4,000 doses a day infused in a 100-pound dog for 2 weeks on end without toxic effects. So I don't know too many people that are going to get anything close to 4,000 doses a day.
Right.
I've had people in those circumstances, take 2 doses of the most concentrated form of Ganoderma, which is the spores, every waking hour, and I've seen acute glomerulonephritis resolve in 2 days.
Wow.
And that's epic.
Now, I've got a question for you. Now, I'm going to be selfish because now I have you at my disposal. I'm going to ask you how you would suggest that I implement some of these products in my practice. And I've got some with me now. Sorry, it just disappeared. So can you explain to me how you would implement the mycelium or the spore powders and explain, what anatomy of the mushroom that it is and how it works?
Absolutely. So, by the way, there's a documenter out there called Fantastic Fungi.
Fantastic fungi. Okay.
Yeah, it's you can get some of it on YouTube. Really well done, but literally the entire earth beneath us is loaded with the mycelium of mushrooms. So we have the mushroom, we have the flowering body that comes above the ground that people know, and for Ganoderma, that's called the Ganoderma lucidum. The mycelium is the root system that goes down deep, and they know that this root system actually has intelligence, antimicrobial action. The largest mass on planet Earth is a mycelial mass in Oregon. And it's, I think the estimate is something like 2,200 years old, and it's only a single cell wall thick. And they say, how could this survive that long? Like we have, 5 layers of skin to protect us. This is one cell wall thick, and yet it's going against all these microbes and all this hostile environment. It's intelligent, it's antimicrobial. When it is exposed to something, it sends a message back to the central nervous system, the nervous system of the plant, and it sends back new antimicrobial compounds. It's learning along the way. So the mycelium itself is profoundly powerful. That's the root system, but it's mostly known in human physiology at this point to work in terms of making better connections in the central nervous system and improving brain health. The Ganoderma lucidum, which is the flowering body, Ganoderma has all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water, and 430 unique molecules to date that have been identified that are unique to the species, 79 of which are antimicrobial, some so powerful that they're proven to block replication of the HIV virus. I was just in South Africa, and some of the testimonials there would, by American standards, be beyond unbelievable. But we see before and after labs of people with profound changes on HIV. Then finally, there's the spores, and that's how the plant replicates. Some of the components within the spore are 75 times more concentrated. So, the company that you and I utilize as a supplier, and I travel with my spores, Organo.
Oh, you've got them too.
Absolutely. They've patented the process by which they get over 99% nutrient bioavailability. And so they have the patent on that process to crack both shells. So the last time they did a competitive analysis, which was a few years ago, the closest competitor had about 15% nutrient bioavailability. So, this company's done a very good job, and their catchphrase is sharing the treasures of the earth with the people of the earth. So when you bring things to people that they need every day that benefits them in a way that they want to consume it, I've taught nutrition, around the world for a long time now. And I would often ask people in the audience, hey, how many of you enjoy taking a handful of pills every day? And out of a couple hundred people there, I might have a few people that raise their hand, and I say, let's drill down on this. Do you really enjoy the process, or do you just do it because you know it's good for you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the time we get down to that, most people do it because it's good for them. One guy literally claimed to enjoy it. Now I next ask the question, how many of you drink coffee or tea? It's over 90% of the room. How many of you enjoy that process? It's every hand. So the vast majority of the population can get good nutrition with a brilliant delivery system.
So I'm going to go on that a little. So just maybe to conclude, or for you to confirm. So would you say the mycelium is more so for, neurodegenerative diseases, people with Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, ADHD?
It wouldn't even have to be neurodegenerative, just any type of neurocognitive improvement that we're looking for.
So cognitive improvement. So
sure.
Okay. And you're saying the Ganoderma is more so antiviral, or it just assists with the antiviral properties?
Well, the mycelium is going to have that too. So the different parts of the plant have different function. So
right.
The first book that I wrote a foreword to, now we're going back almost 30 years, was a book called Herbal Virtues. And here's the first line. There's a synergy in nature that can't be duplicated and can't be isolated. So one of my second associate doctor is a master herbalist, and he'll tell you that when you blend every part of the plant, that's when you get the maximum benefit of the plant. But certain parts have certain benefit, and so for certain conditions, people like to use it. So you say the mycelium for the brain, that's a good indicator. Mm-hmm. The spores, powerfully antimicrobial, more so than the Ganoderma lucidum. I call the Ganoderma lucidum the poor man's version of spores. But now what if you took all three? You took the mycelium, the lucidum, and the spores. Now you have the best that this plant has to offer. And it is called the king of herbs and the herb of spiritual potency and the herb of immortality. These are all three long-lasting nicknames for this plant.
Now, really quick, I don't think we've got too much time left, but I remember watching how they extract the spores. And that's incredible because the mushroom is releasing these spores, but they're so small, like they're microscopic. So that it's quite the process how they're able to do that and harmonize that and turn that into medicine.
It's literally decades of research that has led to that. And there's a ton of plants, literally a ton, that has to be made to get a fraction of these spores to make available.
Right.
And so there's good news and bad news about that. So that's the most common product that's on back order, with this company. But they recognize what they have. So the products they use are USDA certified organic, EcoCert, kosher, halal, etc. So they have been in the process of certifying more organic suppliers, because they're literally going to take this to a $1 billion a month industry, and they need the suppliers to be able to handle it. So they're in process now, but whenever they're available, we buy a ton of them.
Yeah, actually, so on that note, again, I'm going to use you selfishly. So with my protocol and, my gut healing protocol and my approach to, bring balance and homeostasis to the whole microbiome and one's health, how would you suggest to me to implement some of their products, like, the coffee and the mycelium and whatnot?
Well, what I'm going to tell them is healthy coffee or no coffee. It's just that simple. And when I do, when we start looking about what type of bugs live in your gut, we want to kill off the bad, we want to replace the good, and we want to feed the good, in exclusion to bad as best as possible. So the spores have the antimicrobial action where they're going to kill off the bad, but they also have the prebiotics that are going to feed the good.
Oh, interesting.
So those are my go-to. Those work really, really, really well.
So healthy coffee or no coffee.
Yep.
And the spores.
Now, Charles Poliquin was a phenomenal mentor of mine and friend, and the world lost a sage of wisdom when he passed, a year and a half ago. But Charles and I traveled the world, and we taught groups of trainers together. And when he would teach trainers, he'd tell them, if you hurt them, you lose them. And when I would teach nutrition, I'd tell them the opposite. If you don't help them, you lose them. And speed is of the essence when it comes to helping someone. People get bored pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it basically a nutritional boot camp. So I put a little post on my Facebook this morning, but I had a guy come in just a week ago, really, really struggling. And he was just miserable, he had inflammatory process, other things going on, a lot of stress. Body just wasn't working right, poor sleep, etc. Within a week, he came in this morning, and my classic question, if 0 is no change and 100 is perfect ideal, how much better are you? He says, I'm 100% better. I said, how's that possible, 100%? He goes, Bob, I can't even remember the last time I felt this good. I'm brand new. Everything in my life is better. And so I thought, well, why don't I just do a little Facebook Live? Because, we need to let people know that, especially if you have a level of vitality to you, the
Sure.
right program ought to be able to tap into that and make a huge difference fast. Now, does that mean I always get the program right? No. You never know where to start. The gut is going to be a solid starting point in any individual, but given other things, it may not be the perfect starting point for everybody, and that's where clinical expertise comes in.
Right.
You pick your path, and then you go after it, and I want to see a change. And that's why we talked a little bit on the intro about bioterrain. I look at lab markers, and I not only want to see the person feel better, I want to see the numbers change that absolutely prove that we made a change in the chemistry. It's not placebo. Your
Mm-hmm.
body's moved in the right direction. And we've got about 40 different markers that we look at that are really powerful.
Right. So I guess maybe to conclude, with regards to your practice, how do you come about, or how do you, I guess, approach most people with nutrition and supplements? What are some of the key points that my viewers and listeners should pay attention to with regards to nutrition and also supplements? And hopefully some of this is going to be repetition because they've heard me say it, and now it's going to reconfirm that hopefully you're going to be saying it and then expand on it.
Yeah, so somewhere in the references that I believe we shared, there's a journal called Advances in Therapy. And they took age-matched, health-matched individuals. In one group, they gave a phenomenal macronutrient-balanced organic diet. The other group, they gave the same and supplementation. At the start of the study, they literally got into the tissue and did biopsies to assess nutrition levels. Well, at the end of 90 days, they found that the organic diet was not nutrient-dense enough to improve tissue levels of nutrition. So the conclusion in the article was food is too weak to replete depleted cells and bodies, therefore supplementation is advisable for everybody. So when you look at that, how did that happen? Well, the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually suggested it takes about 1,000 years to grow an inch of topsoil. Now, actually, the mycelium can do that faster, and that wonderful documentary, Fantastic Fungi, we just need more mushrooms around. But at any rate, it takes a long, long time to take an inch of topsoil. About, a handful of decades ago, farmers found that they could grow a big plant with 3 elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that's the most abundant fertilizer on planet Earth. But it takes 30 elements to make healthy plants, animals, and humans. So farmers have been putting 3 in and taking 30 out. And you talk to anybody that knows anything about bank balance or math, I tell them I don't really care what your bank account starts at. If you pull 30 out for every 3 you put back in, you're going to create a bad state over time. And that's what we've done with the soil. And so U.S. Department of Agriculture says that, CIA.gov says we have global mineral depletion. And so the soil can't give it to the plants can't give it to the animals, plants and animals can't give it to the humans. And so we have a deficit there. And then on top of that, we have more toxins than ever before. And it might even be argued because of blue light and 5G and other things like that, we have more stress than ever before. So we have to go the extra mile with supplementation. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to food, I tell people eat as clean as possible, as natural as possible, as unrefined as possible. But we know that's not always 100% possible. Always make your best choice. And then I even created my own nutrition pyramid. The base of the nutrition pyramid was food. And I say organic. And for many people, paleo is going to work great. But Jeff Bland would say there's not one paleo. Paleo in the Maasai area is different than the Aborigines, is different than South America, is different than the Inuits. So you should eat like your ancestors ate with that paleo mindset. Mm-hmm. Above foods, we have superfoods. And superfoods have all the fabulous 50 Ganoderma also known as reishi, certainly my favorite, but there's others like acai. Certainly some will even include whey protein as a superfood. Honey can be considered by many as a superfood. Then we go up to medical foods or functional foods. So there's foods that have been well formulated with good organic macronutrient base and supplementation proven to handle a health condition. Then I go to a multivitamin. I go to omega-3s, which we can actually do with activated omega-3s. I go with probiotics, and the top of my pyramid is D3K2, which certainly the D3 we can make with sunshine. But those 7, I believe that everybody should nourish themselves with every single day.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Is there any other points that you would want to touch on? First of all, I'm very thankful for your time, and I'm thankful for you guiding me in my practice with regards to how I should be implementing some things and some approaches, and then also with some supplements and these products now, because like I said, the gentleman with the gout, he's gotten rid of that. I'm actually working with a lady with MS, and really I'm hitting her hard with the spores, like you had mentioned, and she's really starting to see a decline in her symptoms. So
Beautiful.
Again, with the protocol, but I'm really glad that you introduced me to this product, and for everyone's sake, because I'm always bashing them, no coffee, no coffee, no coffee. Now I can offer them a medicinal coffee that's cheaper than our local Tim Hortons or Starbucks and McDonald's. And they're getting a huge array of healthy benefits with it. And guys, like, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rakowski has implemented this in his practice as well. So the fact that I'm doing it just reiterates that I'm going in the right direction.
It's become the top selling product in our clinic. And because
Really?
It's so universal. Well, we sell a lot of things. We're going to sell the probiotics. We're going to sell the vitamin D. We're going to certainly sell the medical foods, functional foods. We're going to do the activated omega-3s. But what's more universal than coffee? And right. So you give someone a probiotic, they do 1 a day, but the average coffee drinker drinks 3.3 a day. Mm-hmm. So why not alkalize your system, get the anti-inflammatory benefit? We didn't talk about that, but it modulates the inflammatory process by 12 different mechanisms. It is one of 4 universal immune modulators. Since you mentioned autoimmunity, we like vitamin D3. I think in Canada you have a little challenge with DHEA. I think that's a prescription item there.
Yeah, you need a prescription for it here.
Crazy. And then the fourth is another Chinese botanical called perilla-seed. But mm-hmm. We've seen plenty of people where their autoimmunity has gone into remission with the right protocol, and sometimes quite fast. Okay,
really quick, one more point, and then I will let you go. Inflammation. Everyone hears about inflammation. Everyone's inflamed, and we need to reduce inflammation. And people don't necessarily know what some of the basic mechanisms are of inflammation and what the causes are. So maybe just try to condense it as best as you can.
Sure.
What is inflammation? What causes it? And why does this particular coffee reduce inflammation?
Well, quite simply, inflammation precedes repair. So it's something that's always going on within the system. But the word inflame literally means fire within. And when it's uncontrolled, it begins to break things down rather than repair the process. The mm-hmm. 3 basic causes are going to be trauma, certainly physical trauma. We're aware of that, toxicity, and nutrient insufficiency. And those are the things that we attempt to buffer with complete protocols. So when you look at Ganoderma, it's proven to have 12 different anti-inflammatory mechanisms. Then when you start looking at alkalizing the system, it's going to make all of those mechanisms even more efficient. Then you start pulling out the toxins and adding the nutrition. We get after the hardcore factors that are related to it. And just another factor is there's something within this that's called a fibrinolytic protease. So inflammatory process is the top risk factor for heart disease. So this was a mouse study, but they gave them a dose of a clotting agent called cholic acid. And they could dose it such that they would give every single animal infused with it a heart attack or stroke. They would either kill them or paralyze it. And they found out that the dose of Ganoderma, which would be 60 micrograms per kilogram body weight, was enough to completely prevent the clotting effects of that. So even a super powerful person like you, 2 cups of any one of our coffee formulas, and that is going to be the effect to buffer the clotting effect of one of the most toxic clotting agents known to humankind, whereas
Wow.
aspirin could do it at 10 to 20 milligrams per kilogram. And if we'd eat that, it'd burn a hole in our gut, within 5 days, and we could bleed
Right.
out.
Yeah.
So I probably went a little overboard there, but powerfully anti-inflammatory,
Mhm.
alkalizing, immune modulating, superfood, great nutrition, no toxicity. It's a winner.
Right. Well, honestly, thank you so much. We talked about mentorship, we talked about nutrition, we talked about books and theologies, and your 4 pillars. Now, actually, really quick, what are the 7 pillars that you talk about, or the 7 do's that you want everyone to improve on or do
Yeah.
properly?
In life, you got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every day.
Very good. That's excellent advice. So on that note, thank you very much. Thank you for helping with my clinical practice, and thank you for introducing me to these products, and for educating me and informing me, and also for the viewers at home or at the gym or driving. Again, hopefully they're not watching while they're driving, but thank you very much for your time. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
I want to plant a seed with you for just a moment. I
Sure.
mentioned to you in all sincerity that you are a younger version of me, but picture at this point in your development, you've got to be at least 2 decades ahead of where I was
Oh,
sitting
wow.
in that same spot. So you're in a great position to make the world better. So, I'm
It's
proud of you.
it.
And
Thank you. It's been certainly a challenge, but a loving challenge, and I'm so excited to see the trajectory of where I'm going to go. But right now, again, with opening of my office, it's only 2 months old. It's great, and to have that reiterated from you is, I think that I'm on the right path, because you're a big role model and an inspiration to me.
well, I guarantee you're on the right path in every way that I can see. So keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. Okay, everyone. So thanks so much, and for all of you that tuned in, good night.
Good night. So long for now.